Hey, how's it going today? This is DeWayne Carron. I'm an educator here with Gamble, and we are back in Missouri today on a rainy day, and we're going to talk a little bit more about the machine and some machine maintenance. When we were here the other day, we got kind of caught off guard and we weren't really prepared for all the questions that we got, and we left some stuff undone. So we're going to go into some more detail about some things that we left off the other day, and then we'll talk about the Zee Motor Belt and how to replace that very quickly, and our needle bar height, our hopping foot height, and some other things to look for. We had some unanswered questions that I want to cover today, and then I think we'll just take questions on anything we can field from there. So we'll just take a minute here and let some people get logged in and hop on, and we'll go ahead and get started in just a moment. So I'm going to come around here to the back of the machine. And I think what we'll do is we're going to start right back here on the motor belt, or the Zee Motor Belt as they call it. We took the machine off the table for this today so we could see it a little bit better. We could get a little bit closer to it, and our lighting is a little bit better. So we took him off of the table, and he'll get a good grooming and put back on. I guess he's a him. Is it a him or a her? It doesn't have a name. Poor thing's been here 5 years and still doesn't have a name. So what we do here is we take our 4mm Allen wrench and we pull these two bolts out of the back of our motor cover right here. And it comes off very easily. If you have an older machine that's been retrofitted, you might have something else right in here that you have to take back off to get to these two bolts. But we take these two bolts off and we lift our cover back off of here. So this is our Zee Motor Belt, as it's called. This is our Zee motor, like we talked about the other day. The X and Y axis goes left and right and north and south on our machine, and on a soy machine, the Z axis is the needle position, and this is the Zee motor. So I just wanted to show you very quickly, we didn't get a chance to cover this the other day, but how easily it is to change this motor belt. So basically we just want to take this back cover off, the two screws, and we can take our motor belt and just pull it off, a little bit of tension, and we can roll it off this bottom pulley right here. And if you come back around and you look right in here, you can see that it's down in this little groove. We can just take it off the top pulley and it comes right off. So like we talked about the other day, we want to take our Clorox wipes and get in there. We want to wipe everything down, clean everything up, make sure that there's no grease or grime or dead parts from our motor belt in there. We can clean our motor belt with the Clorox wipes. Get inside our motor cover, just wipe it down real good. This one isn't very dirty because the belt was changed not too long ago. This machine is 5 years old, so it was coming up on its 5th birthday. We changed the motor belt on it. So if your Zee Motor Belt hasn't been changed in 5 years, it'd be time to put a new motor belt on. And you can get a hold of your Gamble dealer and they'll be sure to take care of you on that, send you a motor belt. So when we go to put it back on, very easily put it back on the same way it come off. We take it, put it up in this little groove right here, right behind our hand wheel, drop it in to the pulley on the top of our motor, and just roll it back on, and you should be good to go. We don't want to make adjustments in our motor. What we don't want to do is get this motor out of level. We don't want this motor out of adjustment to where the belt is going to be pulling unevenly on the motor and the pulley. That's going to shorten the life of our motor. It will put it in a bind, and we don't want to do that. We want it nice and parallel. It should be set up from the factory in this position. It should be in real good shape, and you're taking the exact same belt, putting the exact same belt back on that you took off. So there should be no reason to adjust the motor up and down. It's not on there very tight. You can see there's a lot of play in this, but if we hold this and try and turn it, it doesn't slip at all. So that's what we want with a good new belt. We want it nice and sticky. We want a lot of grip there. So, because this motor does everything for our machine. It tells our needle when to stitch, when to stop, the needle position up or down. This motor does everything for our stitcher, the stitcher portion of our machine. So it needs to be in good shape. So we have it all cleaned up. We put our motor cover back on. We put our 2 screws back in. They go in pretty quickly. And we just tighten them back up. We want to tighten them up till they're just snug. They don't have to be super tight. We just want them kind of snug. We don't want to crush this cover down, of course, in any way. And also, I've seen when these motor covers are on too tight, sometimes at certain speeds they make a funny noise. You get kind of like a harmonics, and they'll kind of ring a little bit and make a funny noise if they're on too tight. So they don't have to be on that tight, just kind of snug on there and you'll be good to go. So with that, it could only take like less than 3 or 4 minutes to change this motor belt. So definitely keep your eye on that. All right, so we're going to spin him around here a little bit, and we're going to talk about some things in the front of the machine that we left off the other day. So the first thing I think we want to talk about is we take the throat plate off of our machine. I drew these little arrows on here for reference, and we'll come back to that here in a little bit. So we take our 4 screws out of our throat plate, and we'll take our throat plate off. And I'm going to put a light in here so we can see, because there's something I want to show you. I'll trade places with you in here. As we look back inside of our machine, I'm going to try and get this light. You can see this little fuzzy area right back in there. Can you see back in here? You can see that big glob of fuzz back in there. And that's going to look like something that needs to be, that you need to take a pair of forceps, say, and reach up in there and pull out. So if you come back over to this side over here, you see that little copper tube in there. And this little copper tube is actually a tube that holds a wick. There's a wick that comes back up this copper colored tube, and it actually lubricates. I'll try and clean it off with this. It actually carries oil to this cam back here that oils our stitcher. So if you look at it from the side, it looks like something that needs to be pulled out, and we definitely don't want to pull that out. This is definitely supposed to be here, and it's supposed to be laying over top of this shaft bringing oil to our stitcher. So show it from the top down if you can. That's right back in there.
It's hard to see.
Yeah, it is hard to see. Which is exactly the point, because you can't really get a good, can you see it right down through here at this angle right here?
That's good right there.
Yeah.
Hold that. Right there.
Mm-hmm. So we want to be sure that we don't reach back in there when we're doing our maintenance and cleaning and pull that little wick back out. There's a big hunk of fuzz just came off there. Because it is oily and it will attract lint, quite a bit of lint actually. So the next thing I wanted to talk about is our needle bar height. And I'm gonna, let me sit right here and you scoot over just a little bit. There we go. We're gonna talk about our needle bar height here just a little bit. This is one of the things that get knocked out, and it can have a, it can make a difference in our stitching. Our stitching is not going to be quite correct if our needle bar height isn't set exactly correctly. So what we want to see when we set our needle bar height is right here, we want to see about 90% of the eye of our needle if we look straight in through the top of our race right here. Is that better?
No, that's good. That's good.
Okay, so right there. So this is what we want to see. This needle bar is actually set just a little bit too low because we can see the entire eye of our needle. Plus we can see just a little bit of glint from the inside of the groove of our needle. So this needle needs to come up just a very little bit, and I'm going to show you how to do that right now. And that wasn't staged. I actually had this machine set just a little bit too low. So we take this cover off of it's going to be right above our keypad right here. If you have some Visions or some other machines, I can't think of exactly which ones have, they'll have a little display right here. You may have to take that down to get to this. Take this little plug out of this cover, and when our needle bar is in the down position, when it's all the way down, this little screw will appear in this hole. And what we want to do is just gently hold your needle bar, put your screwdriver, that is tight, put your screwdriver in that slot and just loosen it up just so, and come back down and we check our needle height. So like I said, we want to see just 90% of the eye of our needle when we're looking straight into our race. The best way to do this actually is with a camera on your cell phone. A lot of times, almost always, when you're doing this, you'll have a bar in the front, you know, our pickup bar on the front of our machine, and we're not going to be able to see just exactly right in there. It's hard to get your head in between the bars and see in here. The best thing to do is to take a cell phone camera, line the camera up directly with the top of the race right here, and snap a picture of it, and then you can plainly see what your needle position looks like, and then you can adjust it accordingly. So that's our needle bar height, And of course, there's videos online on how we adjust that. The second thing we want to talk about today is our hopper foot height. And I'm going to just put a couple screws in here very quickly. Our hopper foot height makes a big difference in our stitching as well. And I want to cover something real quick here. I'm just going to put one screw in here very quickly so we can show this. Just to kind of hold it in position. For the most part, our hopper foot height is set to an average height, I would say, or an average grip. So what needs to happen with our hopper foot is as we're stitching along, the hopper foot has to come down and it has to grip our quilt. On each stitch, this hopper foot comes down and it actually goes down, compresses the quilt top, and it actually kind of grabs the quilt top as we're stitching, and it carries the quilt top with it for that instant that the needle is making its stitch right there. With our hopper foot height set correctly to where it has a good grip on the quilt, it will get a much better stitch. If the hopper foot's not coming down and gripping our quilt quite right, the quilt is going to be able to slip underneath there, and our stitches are going to be pulled a little bit, and we're not going to have the quality of stitch that we really should have. So I'm going to take this needle out real quick and I'll show you how we set that. So we have 3 business cards here, and we're going to take these business cards, we'll put them underneath our hopper foot, we'll drop this back down until it just sits right on there. We come over here and we take this plug out, and can you see in there?
Yes.
Can you see the screw in there?
Yes.
With our hopper foot down, we can see that little screw in there. We loosen that screw up, and it's kind of tricky sometimes to get the screwdriver straight in there. We loosen that up and we drop this hopper foot down on top of 3 business cards. We make sure it's straight here on the bottom, and we'll tighten it back up. So that is a good default height for our hopper foot. Our hopper foot, there are 3 truths. There are 3 things that we always have to see with our hopper foot. It has to come down and grip our quilt. It can't go up too high. If we're using a ruler, for the hand guiders that do ruler work, it can't hop up higher than our ruler. And I forgot the third one all of a sudden. So it has to grip the quilt, it has to not go over our ruler, and it must clear our piecing, because a lot of times, that's the third one, it has to clear our piecing. So there's a lot of times that we'll have like some paper piece quilts with some paper piece stars in them, and we'll have a bunch of joints that come together, and the hopper foot has to be able to go over those high places in our piecing. A lot of quilts like these stack and whack quilts, there'll be a lot of thickness sometimes in the seams of those quilts. So this hopper foot has to go above those quilts. Sometimes if you get a problem quilt, you may have to adjust the stroke in your hopper foot. And the hopper foot being, rather than having a shorter stroke like that, we can adjust the stroke to where it has a much wider stroke. So it comes down to our proper height, but it also jumps a little bit higher so we can go over that thicker piecing. And that's done up here, and we don't have time to cover that today. However, if you ever run into a quilt that's super thick or has big joints or big heavy piecing, and you have to do that, there's an excellent video online on how to set the stroke on your hopper foot. And you can check that out on gamel.com.
Is that it?
It's right up here.
Okay.
Yeah. You pull this hand wheel down, and there's a detent in there. This goes down into that detent, and then we roll this hand wheel back, and that sets the cam on our hopper foot. We're not going to go into that today. So now that we have our needle bar height set correctly, we have our hopper foot back on, and we have its height set correctly. I'm going to go ahead and put a needle back in there. If I can find my needle. Here it is. I'm going to go ahead and put my needle back in. I'm going to grab a needle magnet real quick. I like to, when I put my needle back on, I like to have just a little bit of kick in it. I don't really care for it to be exactly right in there, dead center like that. I like to have just a little bit of angle on the needle. So these little needle magnets are an awesome way to see exactly what position your needle is in. So I'm going to put some more screws back in this needle plate, because there's, we want to cover this too. Chris in Ottumwa messaged me after the last time that we were here, and she was having problems getting her needle plate, the needle centered up into the needle plate, and I want to talk about that for a little bit too. So I put a couple screws back in. We should probably put all 4 of them back in, but we don't really have time for that. We have our needle back in. I'm going to pull this back off, the hopper foot back off, so we can see exactly what we're doing here. So we drop the needle back into the hole. And what we want to do is we want to make sure that the needle, try and get the needle to go right through the center of this needle plate hole. And to do that, this is my best way to do it. I put a little block of wood up against it with the screws just barely snug, and I just tap it into position. I just tap it forward or backwards or whichever way I want, and then I look. Now it's kind of deceiving when you look in from the front or the side because you really can't see. So I put these little arrows on there today. So what you need to do is look at it from the front coming in this way, and also from the side coming in this way, and make sure that the needle is indeed in the center. And actually it fell right in there pretty close. These 2 little screws on the chrome plate up here have very little play. So taking these loose and trying to reposition that isn't going to help us at all. I wouldn't take these 2 screws out. They're not going to be any help repositioning. But these holes have are just a little bit oversized, and they give you plenty of room to play. Now, if Chris's problem the other day was that her needle was too close to the edge and she couldn't get it into position even if she tapped it. And after thinking about that for a little bit, I wondered if her needle bar might have been bent, if it might have been crashed. What you can do if you think that your needle bar is if you think your needle bar might be bent and your needle is too far over to one side of this hole or the other, you could loosen this screw up on our needle bar and turn your needle 180 degrees and see if the needle is still in the same position or if it moved to the other side of the hole. So that would be a pretty good indicator on whether our needle bar is straight or not. Also, you can turn this around for you lefties. Your needle bar is repositionable. So right now, if you were a left-hander, you could go right straight in here right now and change the needle with your left hand, which that's pretty cool. So the machine doesn't really care which side of the needle is, the set screw is on your needle, because our needles do have a round shaft in them. That needle is out of position now, so the scarf is not in the right place, so we would have to reposition this right now. There we go. And then we are back in business. So those are the 3 things that I wanted to cover today. I guess what we'll do is we'll go through, we'll see if we have any questions.
Okay. I have a question. I have to manually adjust my needle higher to pull up my bobbin when beginning quilting. Does something need to be adjusted?
It sounds like it. It sounds like you should probably run through the whole thing. I wouldn't be messing with your timing on your machine, but definitely check your needle bar height, check your height like we just did. Look right straight in, make sure that you see like 90% of the eye of your needle when you look right across the top of the race, and make sure that everything is going correctly. It sounds like something is out just a little bit.
All right. Let me scroll up here. Can you please tell us which models need to have the oil stitcher run and which don't?
Okay, so the oil stitcher routine. The oil stitcher routine was put into our machines years ago. I think it was in the late 1990s. And there was a series of machines that came out that had an oil groove cut in the shaft in a singular direction, as in a singular direction spirally like this. And what was found was the oil wasn't properly migrating through the machine both ways. So for that series of machines, the oil stitcher routine was put into all of our software for that specific run of machines. It was only a series that ran a couple of months, and there were probably less than, say, 500 machines or something like that were manufactured that way. So for the tens of thousands of us after those machines, we really don't actually have to run the oil stitcher routine unless you just want to. If you would like to run the oil stitcher routine, that's fine, but we really don't have to. if you own one of those machines, if you happen to own one of those machines in that series of machines, you know it. You know you have to run this machine because it will tell you it needs oil. It has a noise and it lets you know.
I think this next question is regarding the Zee Motor Belt. It says, does the duration change for lightly used machines? I quilt for myself only, about 10 quilts a year.
Yeah, but the thing about the belts is that they still kind of need to be changed about every 5 years because they get dry and they get slick, and they need to be soft and kind of subtle and kind of sticky so that they grip the pulleys, because we don't want it on there too tight so that they slip. So we want to have a nice belt on there. I think the belts are $13 or $14, right in that price range, and they're more than reasonable and easy to replace. I would just go ahead and replace it.
The next question is from Sue. Hi, I have a question. Should my encoder flash capital letters to small all the time when I'm checking thing? Starts out real fast, then slowly slows down.
I'm not sure. I'm not sure exactly what the question is. It sounds like the encoder is slipping. It could slip for a number of reasons. The encoder wheel could be dirty, or it could be hanging up, or something could be wrong with the encoder, but not very likely. The encoders are usually pretty good. They last a long time. So it's probably something with the wheel. I'll have to reread that question and see if I can get back with you.
Let's see if there is. How often do you change your needle?
I like to change, how often, the question was how, well, you can probably hear that. She's standing right behind the camera, so yeah, we like to change our needles at every quilt change, at every quilt, one per quilt. If we're running a couple of baby quilts, we might run a few baby quilts or something on a needle, but needles aren't overly expensive. We like to keep them sharp and straight, and so about every large quilt.
Helen says, I have a reverse cable that I was told to run once a year. Have you addressed that? I'm
not sure exactly what the reverse cable is for. I believe that is to do the same thing that the oil stitcher routine does. And that would be on an older machine. I'm assuming probably a 20-year-old machine at least. I'm not going to comment on that because I don't know exactly what it is and why you would run that.
I think that's all of the questions.
All right. Well, we really appreciate you guys hopping on with us today. We had a good time doing this. We'll be back here Sunday, and I think Sunday what we'll do is we'll go through a checklist. I want to go through a checklist, and we can talk about getting you started off correctly. A checklist before you start stitching on your quilt, on how to check our thread path, check our thread, make sure everything is all in order, and have you, yes, we're quilting with dogs today, make sure everything is all in order and you're good to go when you take off. So we'll see you Sunday. For everybody here in the States, that'll be at 3 o'clock Central Daylight Time in North America and in Canada. So you guys have a good day, and for our friends in the UK, you have a good night, and for you New Zealanders and everybody in Australia, have a good morning, and we'll talk to you next time.
Isn't there one tomorrow at 3?
And there is one tomorrow too.
Okay.
See you then.
Bye.